My own parents framed me and sent me to prison for 3 years over a lie I never told. They accused me of causing a car accident that led to my sister-in-law, losing her baby, something I never intended, something I never did. They believed that once the cell door closed behind me, I would break, that I would stay quiet, helpless, erased from the world behind concrete walls and iron bars. They were wrong. Even now, I can still hear my mother's voice echoing in that courtroom cold. Sharp, merciless, a life for a life. My father stood beside her, nodding slowly, his lips barely moving as he whispered, "Disappear, for the sake of the family name." My younger brother smirked from the witness stand. "You owe her this, little sis." Every word was chosen with care. Every tear was practiced. Together, they painted me as a monster, the woman who destroyed their unborn grandson. All of it was done for one reason only: to take what was rightfully mine. For 3 years, I rejected every single visitor request. I didn't want to see their faces. I didn't want to hear another carefully packaged lie. The damp gray walls of Lee Arundel State Prison became my calendar. With a broken fingernail, I scratched line after line into the concrete behind my bed frame. 1,095 marks, one for every stolen day. Tomorrow would be the last line. Tomorrow I walk out. The air in this place smells like rust, regret, and waiting. But tomorrow the gates will open, and everything will change. Before I tell you how this all began, and how it finally ends, leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I want to know who is listening to the story of a woman betrayed by her own blood, and forced to pay the price for the truth. Tell me about a time someone you trusted turned their back on you. We're all here for the same reason, because some wounds never heal, and some debts must be paid in full. The day of my release is the day every lie begins to turn on its owner. Those final days in the women's correctional facility outside Atlanta felt endless. I sat on the cold metal bunk, the thin mattress worn flat from years of use. With the jagged edge of a broken nail, I etched one final mark into the damp. Concrete wall, straight, uniform, emotionless. 195 lines. Tomorrow would be the last. The memories returned without warning, sharp and unforgiving. My name is Keziah Vance, the woman who built Vance Cloud Solutions from nothing. It started in my parents' garage in Cascade. Heights with a secondhand laptop and a simple idea. Secure cloud storage designed for small businesses that couldn't afford. Enterprise systems. While others went to college parties and weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, I worked. I skipped sleep. I said no to fun, to distractions, to anything that slowed momentum. At 25, I landed my first paying client. By 33, the company was public valued at $90 million. I owned the majority of the shares. Tan stood beside her in the hospital room, holding Scylla's hand like a devoted husband, his face carefully arranged into something that looked like grief, but felt more like resolve. It was the kind of expression you practice in the mirror, when you know people are watching. My parents arrived soon after. My mother rushed straight to Sela, wrapping her in a tight embrace, sobbing loudly enough for everyone in the corridor to hear. Then she turned toward me. The warmth vanished instantly. What replaced it was something I had never seen before. Pure, measured cold. My father said nothing. When the officers asked about long-standing family tensions, he simply nodded once. That single gesture did more damage than any accusation, and then the evidence began to disappear. The dashboard camera footage from the Tesla vanished without explanation. Recovery specialists later confirmed the files had been completely wiped. No corruption. No partial recovery. No trace left behind. Too clean. Too intentional. Within 48 hours, my business and personal accounts were frozen under an emergency court order. A motion had been filed claiming there was a risk of asset dissipation due to mental instability. The implication was clear. I was emotionally unfit, financially dangerous, and legally isolated. Without access to my own money, I couldn't hire a top-tier private attorney. Instead, I was assigned a young public defender, overworked, underpaid, and drowning in cases. He skimmed my file, asked a few surface-level questions, and assured me we would do our best. The trial lasted 3 weeks at the Fulton County Superior Court. My parents testified first. My mother cried softly on the stand. She's always been jealous of her brother, she said. Even as children. My father followed. Keziah controls the company too rigidly, he told the court. She never gave Tyne a real chance. Then Scylla was wheeled in, her abdomen bandaged, her face pale and fragile. She spoke through tears as she described the moment she felt the car deliberately steer toward the barrier. Tyne held her as she cried, his voice breaking at just the right moments. She grabbed the wheel, he said firmly. I'm sure of it. When it was my turn, I testified calmly. I laid out the facts exactly as they had happened, every detail, every second. But facts without physical evidence are fragile things, and I had none. My public defender faltered under the weight of a united family front. The jurors watched me with thinly veiled suspicion. A powerful businesswoman, wealthy, controlled, suddenly unstable. The verdict came swiftly. 3 years for involuntary manslaughter, and a restraining order barring me from any involvement with my company during my incarceration. When the gavel fell, I didn't cry. A cold emptiness spread through my chest instead. Helplessness, that was all that remained. 3 years. 3 years for everything I had built to be dismantled from the inside, by the people who knew me best. The sharp click of heels and the heavier thud of men's dress shoes echoed through the prison corridor. I closed the worn paperback I'd been pretending to read and sat up straighter. The guard's voice crackled over the intercom. Final approved visit. They entered the visiting room together, as if they had rehearsed it. My mother wore a navy blue dress and her favorite pearl necklace. My father had chosen the charcoal suit he reserved for board meetings. Payne's tie was perfectly knotted, his hair styled like he was heading into a press interview. Scylla followed, carrying a small bouquet of lilies, her sadness arranged into a careful, convincing mask. I picked up the receiver on my side of the plexiglass. My father spoke first, leaning forward with the same authoritative tone he used in negotiations. Keziah, the documents are ready. Transfer the majority of the voting shares to Tyne and we stabilize everything. The company is hemorrhaging without you. My mother's voice followed soft, almost tender but no less calculated. It's the only way to protect what your grandfather built. Investors are nervous. One signature saves jobs. It saves the legacy. Tane took the phone next. His eyes locked onto mine with the same intensity he'd shown on the witness stand. Think about the big picture, little sis. You always said Vance Cloud Solutions was bigger than one person. Scylla pressed her free hand against the glass. After all, she said quietly, you owe it to the family. I said nothing. Then the door on their side opened again. Amari Vance, my youngest brother. He was 25. The one I had fired as CFO 18 months before my arrest for what had seemed like minor reporting discrepancies. He wore a sharp gray suit now, hair cut close, looking far more like a rising executive than an unemployed sibling. He sat down without looking at me. When he finally picked up the phone, his tone was calm, almost distant. Family isn't always about who's right or wrong, he said. Sometimes it's about who survives. His eyes drifted away as he spoke. I scanned their faces, the parents who taught me ambition, the brother who had grown resentful in my shadow, the woman who had married into our family. Something inside me hardened into place. I'm not signing, I said clearly. Never. Consider this goodbye. My father's face turned to stone. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Tyne tightened his grip on the phone. Amari simply placed the receiver back onto its hook without a word. I stood and walked away. Behind me, my mother's voice rose through the glass, sharp with panic. "You're throwing away everything we worked for." I didn't turn back. The following morning arrived, wrapped in the familiar, overcast sky and light Georgia humidity. The prison gates opened exactly on time. Outside, a small crowd had already gathered. Tech reporters from the Atlanta Business, Chronicle, a local news crew, even a correspondent from a national financial network who had flown in overnight. Cameras clicked rapidly as I stepped through the gates wearing jeans, a simple sweater, and carrying nothing but a clear plastic bag holding my authorized belongings. At the front of the crowd stood my parents with Tane beside them, white roses cradled in their arms. Their expressions were carefully prepared, soft with relief, perfectly staged for the lenses. My mother stepped forward first, arms open wide. "Honey, we're so glad you're home." I didn't slow down. I walked straight past her without meeting her eyes. The roses remained suspended in the air, untouched. The moment fractured instantly. A sleek black Bentley pulled up to the curb. The rear door opened from the inside. Sterling Blackwood stepped out, 34. Harvard Law, a reputation for dismantling corporate fraud and never losing a boardroom battle. Tane had tried and failed to hire him 3 times in the last 2 years. "Miss Vance," Sterling said, his voice clear enough for every nearby. "Microphone to catch your car is waiting." I slid into the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, airtight thud, muting the sudden explosion of shouted questions. Inside, the car smelled of new leather and subtle cologne, clean-controlled, intentional, through the tinted glass. I watched the scene shift. Reporters turned away from my family and toward the Bentley, shouting about who was picking me up and what it meant for Vance Cloud Solutions stock. My mother's arms slowly fell to her sides. My father's jaw tightened, working silently. Tane stared at the Bentley's license plate as if trying to memorize it. Sterling took the driver's seat. He had insisted on driving himself. "The penthouse is ready," he said calmly. "The team is waiting." I leaned back against the headrest as the car pulled away from the curb. "Take the long way," I said. "I want to see the city again." The Bentley merged into traffic. Behind us, my former family stood frozen under flashing cameras, their carefully planned reconciliation collapsing in real time. I didn't look back for long. Morning light streamed through the windows of the midtown, penthouse overlooking Piedmont Park. I stepped into the apartment that had been prepared weeks in advance, fully stocked, pristine. The door closed behind me with a finality that settled deep in my chest. The air smelled clean lemon wax, fresh linens, nothing like the stale concrete I had breathed for 3 years. I dropped the small plastic bag onto the marble counter and went straight to the bathroom. The shower was all chrome and glass. 6 rainheads, a handheld attachment. I turned the water as hot as I could tolerate and stood beneath it until time dissolved, scrubbing my skin with cedar-scented soap until it burned. Steam filled the room, washing away the institutional disinfectant that had clung to my hair and pores. I watched gray water spiral down the drain and wondered if rage could disappear just as easily. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a thick white robe, Sterling Blackwood and Odessa, Rhodes were waiting in the living room. A mahogany table had been arranged neatly with stacked documents, 2 open laptops and a steaming coffee pot. Odessa, 61. Silver hair, piercing eyes rose when I entered. A former prosecutor turned corporate powerhouse. Sterling remained seated, focused on his screen. "Welcome home, Miss Vance," Odessa said, her voice firm and precise. "We have a lot to discuss." I poured myself coffee into a real ceramic mug, the first in years, and sat across from them. The liquid was dark and bitter. It burned my tongue in the best way. Sterling slid the first folder toward me. "Revocation of the emergency power of attorney your brother filed. Citing mental incompetence," he said. "We're challenging it on grounds of fraud and lack of medical evidence. Your signature restores you as majority shareholder immediately." I signed without hesitation. The pen felt strange in my hand. Too smooth. Too expensive. Odessa placed a second document in front of me. "Emergency motion for a full forensic audit and a temporary asset freeze," she said. "Filed with the Superior Court this afternoon. No further transfers until the audit concludes." I signed that too. The war had officially begun. The pushback came almost immediately. Sterling's phone vibrated against the table. He answered, listened in silence, then frowned. "The National Bank is resisting," he said. "They're citing the existing freeze order and asking for 24 Hours to review the conflicting filings. Odessa's eyes narrowed. They'll have 4. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to file the ex parte motion now. Judge Harrison owes me from the Meridian case. Sterling was already typing, fingers moving fast across the keyboard. As he worked, Odessa reached into her briefcase and placed a small black USB drive on the table. No label, just a handwritten min blue ink on one side. "This is the backup," she said quietly. The original footage and records were destroyed, wiped from a server in Buckhead 17 months ago. Our forensic team spent over a year reconstructing fragments from external backups, mirrored servers and deleted email chains. She met my eyes. "It's all here. Internal communications, offshore transfers, shell companies registered in the Caymans, enough to prove systematic embezzlement." I picked up the drive. It was lighter than I expected. 3 years of someone's careful planning reduced to 8 grams of plastic and silicon. Sterling finished the call. Motion filed. Hearing in 2 hours. The bank will comply or face contempt. I inserted the USB into the secure laptop they had prepared. Folders opened neatly on the screen. Spreadsheets with dates and amounts. Email threads between Tyne and unfamiliar accounts. Invoices for consulting services that had never existed. Millions diverted slowly, methodically, over years. My stomach tightened not from shock, but from the precision of it. This wasn't impulse. This was architecture. My phone buzzed on the table the new one Sterling had handed me in the car. Notifications piled in. Social media tags, news alerts, unanswered calls. I ignored them. Across the city, at the Georgia World Congress Center, the National Tech Summit was underway. 800 attendees filled the main hall. Thousands more watched via livestream. Payne stood on stage in a Navy suit mid-presentation on Vance. Cloud Solutions, new enterprise security suite. Behind him, projected revenue figures scrolled across the screen numbers I had never authorized. He announced a partnership with Pacific Data Systems, $50 million. The company's largest deal to date. Applause filled the room. Champagne glasses were brought out for the ceremonial signing. Tyne pulled out the company's titanium, black card unlimited limit, and handed it to the waiter. The terminal beeped once. Declined. A flicker crossed his face. He laughed it off, blaming a technical issue, and tried again. Second beep. Declined. A murmur rippled through the front rows. Tyne's phone vibrated against his thigh. He stepped aside, still smiling for the cameras. "Mr. Vance," the voice on the other end said calmly. "This is the compliance department at National Bank. All corporate accounts have been frozen, by court order, effective immediately. No transactions will be authorized until further notice." The color drained from his face under the stage lights. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Someone in the back began recording on their phone. The CEO of Pacific Data froze mid-handshake, suspicion settling across his expression. Tyne tried to recover, joking about glitches, waving it off, but the moment was gone. Partners exchanged looks. Investors checked their phones. Within minutes, Vance Cloud Crisis was trending. Back in the penthouse, I closed the laptop. The coffee beside me had gone cold. Odessa gathered her documents. The freeze also applies to any personal accounts tied to company funds. Credit cards, lines of credit, everything. I nodded. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something close to control. Sterling stood. "We'll monitor the fallout. If necessary, we go public tomorrow." I walked to the window. Below, the city lights flickered to life. My city, my company, my life slowly aligning again, piece by piece. The USB drive rested on the table behind me like a small black bomb, waiting for the right moment. Morning light was just touching the penthouse windows when Payne's phone began vibrating, relentlessly on his nightstand. He squinted at the screen. 47 missed calls. Messages from board members, investors, his assistant. The first message read, "Call immediately. The medical records have been leaked." Tyne opened the link his assistant had sent. The document filled the screen instantly. A scanned report from Grady Memorial Hospital, dated 3 weeks before the accident. Diagnosis: spontaneous miscarriage due to prolonged work-related stress. At the bottom of the page was Sila's signature, clear and unmistakable, acknowledging the loss. Tyne's chest tightened. He kept scrolling. The records had been formally submitted as evidence in the emergency audit motion filed the day before, and picked up by news outlets overnight. The headlines were already live. Vance Cloud Solutions, CEO's wife, lost pregnancy before alleged accident. Questions emerge over founder's conviction. Tyne kicked the sheets aside and rushed downstairs. In the kitchen, Sela was pouring herself coffee. She turned with a smile until she saw his face. "Is this true?" he demanded, shoving the phone toward her. She glanced at the screen, then set her mug down with deliberate calm. "Answer me," he snapped. "You lost the baby before the accident." She crossed her arms. "Yes." The room seemed to tilt. "And you let me," he said, his voice shaking. "You let all of us testify that Keziah caused it." Sela's tone didn't change. "You wanted her gone. The company was slipping through your fingers. I saw an opportunity." "An opportunity?" His shout echoed off the marble walls. "You sent my sister to prison for 3 years for a lie." "Our lie," she corrected coolly. "You believed it because you wanted to. You needed her out of the way to take control." He paced the floor, dragging his hands through his hair. "The board is calling an emergency session today. Investors are pulling out. The Pacific Data deal is dead." Sela picked up her coffee again. "Then fix it. Deny it. Say the records are fake." "They're not fake," he said. "They're from Grady, your doctor, your signature." He stopped in front of her. "How could you look me in the eye every day knowing this?" She met his stare. "Why did you never ask?" She replied simply. "You were too busy celebrating your new title." Silence settled between them, thick and suffocating. Outside, a news helicopter hovered low over the Buckhead neighborhood. Tane's phone rang again. His father's name flashed across the screen. He ignored it. "You're not the victim here," he said quietly. "Neither are you," Sela replied. "We both wanted the same thing. I just made it happen." For the first time, he truly saw her, the calculation behind the beauty, the patience behind the charm. "Get out," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Pack your bags. I want you gone by tonight." Sela laughed, bitter and sharp. "With what money? Your accounts are frozen too, remember." He had no answer. Across town in downtown Atlanta, the lobby of Vance Cloud Solutions buzzed with nervous energy. Employees whispered in tight clusters. Security presence had doubled at the doors. I walked into the executive conference room where a small press pool was already waiting, 3 cameras, 6 local reporters, and Bloomberg. Odessa had been clear. Keep it brief. Keep it factual. No emotion. I stepped up to the podium in a simple black blazer, my hair pulled back. Camera flashes went off. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began, my voice steady. "As the majority shareholder and founder of Vance Cloud Solutions, I am announcing an independent forensic audit of all company finances, effective immediately. This audit will be conducted by an external firm, with full cooperation from law enforcement if necessary." Questions erupted. "Ms. Vance, what about the medical records released last night? Is this connected to your brother's management? Are criminal charges being considered?" I raised one hand. "Certain documents have come to light," I said evenly, "that raise serious questions about the events leading to my wrongful conviction." Paused, letting the words settle. "The truth will come out through the proper channels." "The truth will come out through the proper channels," I continued evenly. "Until then, I am officially reassuming my role as chairperson. My responsibility is to protect this company and the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depend on it." A reporter pushed forward. "Miss Vance, do you believe your family framed you deliberately?" I looked straight into the camera. "The evidence will speak for itself," I said calmly. "Justice always finds its way to the light." 8 minutes. Not a second more. I stepped away from the podium. No follow-ups. No reactions. Odessa immediately moved in, ushering the press out of the room with practiced efficiency. Sterling handed me a fresh stack of printouts. "Social media engagement is exploding," he said. "The stock dropped 12% at the opening bell, but it stabilized after your statement." He glanced at his tablet. "The board is calling for an emergency vote on leadership transition." "Let them," I replied without hesitation. "We'll be ready." That night, back at the penthouse, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. Traffic flowed below like a living network of light and motion. My phone buzzed again. 23 missed calls. All from my mother. I didn't answer. The lies were unraveling faster than they had ever been woven. And for the first time, I wasn't the one paying the price. The next afternoon, traffic hummed through the tree-lined streets of Buckhead as 2 moving trucks and a court officer's SUV rolled to a stop outside the gates of the Vance estate. I stepped out of the Escalade with Sterling Blackwood at my side, the eviction notice crisp in his hand. The house 6 bedrooms, an infinity pool private. Theater had been titled solely in my name, long before my parents moved in 20 years earlier. A premarital asset, clean, undisputed. The court hadn't hesitated. The gates opened electronically. My parents stood on the front steps with suitcases already packed at their feet. My mother clutched a small jewelry box to her chest, My father held a single garment bag, his grip tight. Tane's face was swollen from exhaustion. Scylla kept her eyes fixed on the ground. The court officer read the order aloud. Immediate vacation of the premises. Personal clothing and toiletries only. All furniture and items purchased with company funds must remain. My mother broke first. She dropped the jewelry box and rushed toward me, arms outstretched. "Baby, please," she cried. "This is our home. Think of your father's health." Her voice cracked as she slipped into the language of my childhood, the language of lullabies and bedtime prayers. "Oh, my daughter." My father remained rigid, but his hands trembled at his sides. The man who once dominated boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals couldn't meet my eyes. Tyne stepped forward. "Keziah, think about what you're doing. This will be everywhere. The company's stock." "It's already everywhere," I said quietly. The cameras across the street were already rolling. Amari arrived just then in his Audi. He parked at the edge of the driveway and walked up slowly, hands tucked into his pockets. To anyone watching, he looked like the concerned youngest son, the reasonable one, the peacemaker trying to calm a family crisis. He placed a gentle hand on my mother's shoulder. "She's angry right now," he said quietly. "Give her some space." Then he turned to me, lowering his voice. "Little sis, maybe you should cool off. They're still our parents." Our eyes met for a moment longer than necessary. His gaze was steady, knowing. Tyne dropped to his knees on the stone steps, his shoulders sagging under the weight of what was unfolding. He looked up at Amari desperately. "Talk to her," he pleaded. "You're the only one she might listen to." Amari studied him for a long second. "You made your choices," he said simply. Then he turned away. Selah finally broke her silence, her voice sharp with bitterness. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I didn't respond. Behind the gates, neighbors had begun to gather. Tech executives, doctors, people who valued privacy above everything else, yet phones were raised, recording anyway. A Channel 5 news van pulled up across the street, its camera already rolling. The movers went to work. Framed artwork purchased on company expense accounts. Custom Italian kitchen appliances. Gym equipment billed as an executive wellness initiative, item by item. The illusion of luxury was stripped away and loaded into trucks. My mother collapsed onto the steps, sobbing into her hands. My father finally moved to help her, but his legs shook beneath him. The man who once commanded rooms now struggled to stand. Taine remained on his knees until Sterling politely suggested he rise so the officers could finish their work. 30 minutes later, they stood outside the gates with 3 suitcases and 2 duffel bags, the only belongings they could prove were purchased with personal funds. The gates closed with a soft electronic click. Across the street, a neighbor I had waved to for years filmed quietly from her driveway. By nightfall, the videos were everywhere: neighborhood group chats, Twitter, local news feeds. Vance family evicted. Tech founders' revenge. I watched from the entryway as the moving trucks drove away. The house felt abruptly hollow, every footstep echoing louder than before. Amari lingered after the others left. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly once we were alone. I nodded once. He squeezed my arm briefly, the first physical contact we'd shared in years, then turned and walked back to his car. The sun dipped behind the Georgia pines, bathing the neighborhood in gold. Inside, the movers finished their work and left. I stood alone in the foyer, the air still faintly scented with my mother's perfume. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument we had ever had. For the first time, I questioned whether revenge felt like victory or just another form of loss. The boardroom at Vance Cloud Solutions, headquarters in downtown Atlanta, carried that same weight. The air was thick, charged with things no one dared say out loud. I sat at the head of the long glass table, the city skyline stretching behind me through floor-to-ceiling windows. All 12 board members were present. Some sat in their seats. Others appeared on screens from San Francisco and London. No one spoke. They were waiting for me. I opened the emergency session with a single sentence. "We are here to address the financial and leadership irregularities uncovered during the ongoing audit." Odessa Rhodes stood beside me and projected the first slide, a timeline of suspicious transactions. Stretching back 3 years, the room shifted uncomfortably as numbers and dates filled the screen. Then the door opened. Amari walked in. He carried a thick accordion folder, his expression calm but resolute. He placed it on the table with a soft thud that echoed louder than expected. With the board's permission, he said evenly, "I'd like to present additional evidence." Several members exchanged surprised glances. Amari had been invited only. As an observer, his limited shares, through our mother's trust, gave him that right. But no one had anticipated this. He opened the folder. Printed emails, bank statements, invoices for consulting services that never existed, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands tied to shell companies, payments to a private investigator who had followed me before the accident, bribes paid to the dashcam technician, small amounts, funneled through gift cards and payment apps. I started compiling this the day Keziah fired me, Amari said quietly. Those accounting discrepancies weren't mistakes. They were early indicators of systematic embezzlement. He paused. I pretended to stay neutral with the family to keep my access. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday. I documented what I could. He looked directly at me, just for a moment. That day I chose her side. I just needed time to prove why. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction. A venture capital director demanded verification. Another board member asked about authentication. Odessa stepped in, calm and precise, confirming the chain of custody. Every document had been forensically digitized, timestamps intact, metadata preserved. I let the discussion run for 10 minutes. Then I raised my hand. Motion to remove Thine Vance from all executive and board positions. Effective immediately, I said, and to refer the findings to federal authorities. Hands went up one by one. Unanimous. Thane wasn't in the room. He had been formally asked to stay away during the investigation. But by the end of the hour, his removal was official. The company he had stolen from no longer belonged to him. Months followed in a blur of depositions, subpoenas, and discovery. The reckoning had only just begun. The U.S. Attorney's Office took over the case within weeks. The charges were extensive wire fraud, embezzlement, perjury, conspiracy. The federal trial stretched across 6 weeks at the courthouse in downtown Atlanta. The prosecution presented the story with brutal clarity. Greed wrapped in the language of family loyalty, theft disguised as legacy preservation. One by one, the truth dismantled the lies. My parents were first to fold. They accepted a plea deal 18 months, each for perjury and conspiracy to commit fraud. They avoided additional prison time beyond what they had already served while awaiting trial, but the cost was permanent. All voting rights tied to the company trust were revoked. The legacy they had protected so fiercely was no longer theirs to control. Scylla testified next. In exchange for probation and community service, she admitted her role in initiating the false accusation. The court sentenced her to 5 years of probation and a permanent criminal record. The sympathy she once weaponized was gone. Thane fought harder than all of them. His defense argued that everything he did was aggressive but legal corporate maneuvering, that he was simply protecting shareholder value. The jury wasn't convinced. Guilty on all counts. 10 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 7. Restitution of $12 million, the amount traced directly to his schemes. I sat in the front row every day of sentencing. When his name was called, my mother cried silently, shoulders shaking. My father stared straight ahead, his face locked into something unreadable. Scylla looked at no one. When it was Tane's turn, the judge recited the charges slowly and deliberately. Embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit perjury, and the wrongful conviction of Keziah Vance. As the bailiff stepped forward with the handcuffs, Tyne finally turned toward me. His lips formed my name, but no sound came out. I didn't look away. Confusion, anger, pleading. It was all there in his eyes. But so was mine. 3 years stolen. A company nearly destroyed. Trust shattered beyond repair. They led him away last. The courtroom doors closed with a heavy finality. Outside, reporters waited in the rain. I slipped out through a side exit with Odessa as the steady Georgia. Drizzle began to fall again. In the car, she glanced at me. "You want to make a statement?" "No," I said quietly. "The verdict speaks for itself." I watched the courthouse fade in the rearview mirror. Relief came, but it was hollow. There was grief, too, for a family that no longer existed. But above everything else, there was determination. The lies had ruled long enough. Now it was the truth's turn. 1 year later, I sat in the visiting room of the Federal Correctional Institution in Atlanta. The plexiglass between us was scratched, and cloudy from countless conversations like this. Tane looked smaller in the orange jumpsuit, the fabric hanging loose on a body that had lost weight. His hair was cropped short. Dark circles framed tired eyes. The expensive watch from our family photos was gone. He picked up the phone on his side. I picked up mine. He spoke first, his voice rough and unsteady. "Thank you for coming," Tane said quietly. "I didn't think you would." I said nothing. I waited. "I know an apology doesn't fix anything," he continued. "But I've had time to think. A lot of time." He paused, searching my face through the scratched plexiglass. "Mom and Dad ask about you in every letter. They want to know if you're okay." I kept my expression neutral. He leaned closer. "The company is doing well. I read the quarterly reports that come into the prison library. Amari's doing an incredible job as CEO." I nodded once. His throat tightened. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to see you to say it to your face." For a long moment, the only sound between us was the distant murmur of other visitors. Other confessions, other regrets. Then I spoke. "There is no forgiveness," I said evenly. "Not for you. Not for Mom or Dad." He stiffened. "The blood bond is broken," I continued. "Legally, emotionally, completely. I changed my name on all documents. Months ago. You are strangers to me now." His face collapsed inward, but he didn't look away. "I transferred full ownership and control of Vance Cloud Solutions to Amari," I said. "He's the only one who chose what was right over what was easy. Ethics over family pressure. He earned it." Tane's knuckles turned white around the phone. "I deserve this," he whispered. "Yes," I said, "you do." Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. When the guard signaled the end of visiting time, Tyne pressed his palm flat against the glass. I hung up without waiting for anything more. As I stepped outside into the dry Georgia air, something inside me shifted. The weight I had carried for 4 years didn't disappear, but it changed. It felt lighter somehow. 3 stolen years, a youth that won't return. The stress of prison left scars no court could erase. Doctors later confirmed, the trauma was too deep for me to ever likely have a child of my own. My trust in the family I was born into was shattered beyond repair. But refusing to forgive isn't weakness. It's protection. It's choosing to guard what's left of yourself, instead of handing it back to be broken again. Greed can rot a family from the inside, turning love into leverage and loyalty, into obligation. It starts small. Resentment, whispers about inheritance, quiet comparisons. Then it grows until people justify anything to claim what they believe they're owed. True loyalty isn't guaranteed by DNA. It's chosen. Amari proved that by risking everything to stand for what was right when it cost him the most. I drove west as the Atlanta skyline rose in the distance. The company thrives under new leadership. I consult when needed, but most days I'm building something smaller now. Something quieter. Something that belongs only to me. Some losses are permanent. Some decisions define us forever. But survival, real survival, means deciding who gets to stay in your life and who doesn't, and living with that choice without apology. Did you like the story? Which city are you listening from? Thank you for your support. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. On the screen, you'll see 2 more life stories I highly recommend. There's much more on the channel, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.